Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you can join us for this on-demand webinar hosted by JFL Total Wealth Management. Today's session is part of a multi-part series called Laying Your Financial Foundation, where we review the important fundamentals for saving and spending when you're in your 20s and 30s and demonstrate how your financial success will depend on more than just a good income. Today, we are reviewing how much money you really need when looking to purchase your first home. Your down payment is just one part of that housing budget. We'll also dive into when renting is a better option than buying. While each of your financial situations are unique, there are certain foundations, including budgeting responsibly for your first house, you will all need in order to start the path to success. If you have any questions at the end of the presentation, please contact our office. We also highly recommend checking out our webinar library at jfltotalwealth.net/webinars for additional installments of our Laying Your Financial Foundation series. We review budgeting, saving for retirement, managing student loans and other debt, and insurance protection. You can also download copies of these presentations on our website. Without further ado, let's introduce today's speaker. Jerry Lynch is a certified financial planner and has been an independent financial advisor for 23 years, working in the financial industry for more than 30. He has 3 sons, one already in college, one headed there in the fall, and another in high school.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
We know that each of you has a personal view of what success might look like for you as you get older, have families of your own, and reach career milestones. Our goal during this series is to provide you with the background on the topics listed here so you have the foundations for financial security at every stage of your life. Today we are talking about budgeting responsibly for your first home. Jerry, take it away.
Okay. Well, a lot of times people come up to me and they say, Jerry, you're a financial planner. What do you understand about real estate? And I'll just tell you my background and how I know what I know. I've been a real estate investor for over 30 years. I've been a landlord for that period of time. I've owned commercial properties. I owned a car wash, residential, all different types of properties. When I'm looking at properties for myself personally versus as an investment, there are 2 different processes that I use. So the first thing I always say is that if you're looking at buying a home, you're looking at something that's incredibly expensive. Often when you walk into a home for the first time, it's very emotional, okay? And the first thing I want to stress to you is that never make an emotional decision when it comes to money. Make a list of everything that you want in your home, that you must have in your home. Make a list of all the things that you would like to have in your home, and make a list of the things that you definitely don't want in your home. And try to go out with a checklist of things so you're making more of a logical decision when you're buying your home. There's some general rules that we're going to use when we're taking a look at to see what we can afford and what makes sense from a financial standpoint. Now, the general rule of thumb is that maximum of 28% of your gross income should be used for the home purchase or for the cost of being in that home. So, for example, if you're making $50,000, 28% of that, or $14,000 a year, should be the maximum amount of money that you're spending on that property. Get financing in advance. All right, you want to make sure that you understand what you're approved for before you start looking at properties and you get into something that is just not affordable. Understand what your income will, and they'll usually give you a number that's substantially higher than what you should be borrowing. All right, just because a mortgage company is willing to lend you $500,000 doesn't mean that you should do it if the numbers don't make any sense. Okay. Now, also take into consideration that when you buy a home, the more expensive the home, the more it is to maintain. You know, generally you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 4% of the cost of the home each year that you're going to need to spend in maintenance on it. The 4% is really on the older homes, the 1% is on the newer homes. So if you're buying a $4,000 home, reasonably anywhere from $4,000 to $16,000 a year is going to be needed to maintain that. Your property taxes also increase as the value of your home goes up. The cost to insure it goes up as the cost of the home is more and more expensive. So need to take into consideration all of these costs when we're seeing, does this make sense from a financial standpoint? Add all these numbers and make sure they make sense. And also think about where you're going to be in the next couple of years. So for example, if you're potentially starting a family in the next couple of years, you may not want to have a condo. You may look more towards a house where you have a backyard where your children can play at some point. You don't want to buy too much, but you want to make sure that you could be in there for a reasonable period of time. every time you get in and out of a home, it's going to cost you anywhere between 5 and 10% in terms of realtor commissions, things that you have to do to improve your home before you can get on the market and sell it, and people are going to be negotiating. And the longer you're in the home, the more the numbers are going to make sense. But if you have to get out of it, the problem is that you may be getting out at a bad time, and it may cost you substantially more. So make sure when you're doing this, you have that list, you're thinking about everything that you need in that property. Over a period of time, you buy that right property, you hold it for a long period of time, and you'll do fine. But buy the right home, that's very critical. Now, a couple of the things that you should be thinking about too is when you're doing this is we need to save for a down payment. Ideally, I prefer a down payment of 20%. That's when you get the cheapest rate. But there are other programs out there that start on a much lower percentage basis, and it may make sense. In the right situation, it may make sense. What I generally suggest people to do is that set up a separate bank account on the opposite side of town that is not open at night. It's not open on weekends. It is the most inconvenient bank in the world. And every paycheck, I want to have a little bit of money go out of your paycheck into that inconvenient bank and start having money go in there on a regular basis. You know, see what you could do to increase contributions going in there. And that's just going to be for one sole purpose of creating enough money that we have for a down payment. Now, again, if you talk to the financing people, you can find out exactly what you need at what prices, but we need to have a target of what it is we're trying to do. The second thing is a lot of times people say, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a fixer-upper, I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to have all this equity in the home. Now, I have mixed feelings on this, first of all. Can you do this work? Are you capable of doing this work and having this work look good? A lot of people think that they're great carpenters like myself, and when I look at it when I'm finished, it doesn't really come out that well. So that's the first thing, is do you have the capacity to do it? The second thing is a lot of times when you do these renovations yourself, you think you're adding value to the home, and the reality is that you only get pennies back on the dollar. So for example, if I redo my basement and it costs me $30,000, I'm not adding $30,000 of value into the home. I might be adding $15,000 of value. So I'm losing 50% of my money as soon as I walk in. If I'm doing an addition on my home, basically I'll probably get 60% of my money back, not 100%. So I'm automatically losing money on these things. Often what I do is I tell people is instead of considering doing this stuff yourself, why don't you find somebody who just did it, buy it from them, and you're paying 60 cents on the dollar for those renovations. That's the type of thing I want to do. The other thing too is you need to check out your credit score. And we did a presentation on this too, so check our webinar, you could go back and do it. Understand what your numbers are. If your FICO score, which is how they usually determine how they give you a interest rate, is bad, it's reasonable you could be paying over 1% more on your mortgage for a very long period of time. Now, if you have a 30-year mortgage and you're paying 1% more on $300,000, that's $3,000 a year times how many years before you could get that program refinanced. And sometimes even if you refinance, you may not get a better rate because the interest rates may go up. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure that your FICO score is good. Take a look at everything that's on your credit report so that when you're going for this, you know that you're going to get the best rate possible and you can lock it in for the longest period of time. Now, when you talk about buying a home, there's a few things that you need to understand in terms of costs that are associated with it. When you go for a mortgage, there's a lender fee. They're going to charge some kind of percent of the mortgage. A lot of times that's put into the mortgage, and they may do a credit report. They may have a appraisal on the property. There's several things that they may do. The attorney, you need to have an attorney review this, at least in the state of New Jersey. Certain states don't require that you use an attorney. I think Florida is one of them. But the bottom line is I think it makes sense. If you're buying something that's really expensive, you want an attorney to take a look at this thing and just make sure something's not fundamentally wrong with it before you end up buying it. A title search just basically means there's no liens against your property, that nobody in the past did some work, maybe a contractor did some work and they didn't get paid. They may have a lien against your property. And if you buy that and it's not cleared, you owe that contractor some money. So a title search and insurance will make sure that if there is anything, it's taken care of. The deed has to get recorded. You want a home inspection. You want a good home inspector, not necessarily the person that the realtor is suggesting. Go find somebody who know is very good at this stuff and will give you a very detailed report so you know exactly what you're walking into and what kind of maintenance you're going to have to do within a very short period of time. Surveys, escrow funds, cash reserves. So generally, if you're looking at a $300,000 home at 20% down in New Jersey, it's probably around $14,000 to $15,000 in additional costs you'll need on top of that down payment to be able to buy that property. So make sure that you take that into consideration, because you don't want to be going through the mortgage process and say, oh my God, I'm running out of money. That's not a really good thing to do. Okay, a couple other things. One of the questions people always have for me is, do I rent or do I buy? It depends. All right. Now, when I'm looking at this thing, the first thing I'm going to say, if I'm renting, there's advantages of renting. Number one is that greater short-term flexibility. You know, if I'm thinking that my career may move me in a couple different directions and I'm not sure where I'm going to be, I don't want to have a property that I'm getting in and out in a very short period of time. I had mentioned before, 5 to 10% it costs to get out of a property. And also, the longer the period of time that I have, the more reasonable I could at least get my money back. If I'm getting in and out, it's very hard to determine whether or not I'm going to make any money on this deal, and it's reasonable that I could lose a lot. Your expenses are substantially lower when you rent, because you're really borrowing the house for a very small period of time. You don't have to worry about maintaining it. You don't have to cut the grass. You don't have to fix the roof. You don't have to make sure the heating system is working. That's something the landlord is taking care of for you. The insurance, renter's insurance, is substantially less expensive than homeowner's insurance, because really renter's insurance is taking care of your stuff inside the house, where the homeowner's insurance is taking care of replacing the physical building. So there's a lot different. And if your payments are lower, you potentially have the ability to save on a regular basis whatever the additional money you would have been if you had owned the home. If that's $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year over a period of time. That extra money could give you a nice little nest egg. Now, the downside of renting is simply that, again, you're not really getting any equity. You know, from 2000 to 2019, the average price of rents increased by almost 80%, meaning that you lock in something today, and over a period of time, it just gets more and more expensive. You know, generally with my tenants, I'll increase their rent probably anywhere from 2 to 3% a year, maybe more, depending on if my costs go up. But anytime I see an increase in costs as a landlord, I'm shifting it back onto my tenants. There's restrictions on what you can do. You can't paint my place. You can't go in there and knock down a wall. You can't do improvements that basically alter the property. You're required to leave it in the same place, in the same order that you did. So you can't get as creative on a rental property as you can on something that you physically own. So the advantages of saving or buying a home is that, first of all, when you put the key into your door of your home for the first time and you walk through that entranceway, you feel really good about yourself. It is one of the most amazing experiences that anybody could ever have. And I love when people do that for the first time. You could control and personalize it. You could do gardening. You could paint the roof, the walls. You could do whatever it is that you want to make that home your own. There's tax benefits for doing this. The mortgage interest is tax deductible. The property taxes are tax deductible up to a certain limitation. But there are benefits because the government wants you to own a home. They think communities are better when there are homeowners that are in there. Fixed rate mortgages, okay? So for example, I could lock in a rate for 30 years, meaning the cost of my mortgage for the next 30 years, if I'm staying in that home, is never gonna change. If I'm renting, that landlord's going to probably be increasing my rent over a long period of time. If I lock in a 30-year mortgage, my rates will be guaranteed the same for the next 30 years. That's pretty good. All right. And then also over a period of time, you're going to get equity in your home. First of all, you're paying down the mortgage, so you're developing some equity there. And over a period of time, you should get some rise in value of the home. You know, generally homes will keep up with the cost of inflation. So there will be some increase if you're in there for a long period of time. Now, the negative things about owning a property is a couple different things. Number one, it takes about 5 years just to break even. When you take into consideration all the costs you have for buying the home, the expenses, everything like that, moving and everything, it's going to take some time before you just break even. So you better go into it with a long-term perspective. Maintenance repairs are costly. It'll blow your mind how much a roof costs. It'll blow your mind how much a furnace costs. These things need maintenance on a regular basis. So even if you're not replacing an air conditioning system, servicing these things on a regular basis could add up to a decent amount of money. There's no guarantee that you're going to make money on this investment. So my first property I bought in Hoboken, it was a condo. I paid $123,000 for it. Was trying to sell it 6 years later and an offer for $80,000. And the only reason why I sent the person away, he was an obnoxious person. He kept on asking for more and more stuff. And I just said, I'm not doing it. And that's when I actually became a landlord. I rented it out for a period of time. Over a period of time, it went up and it was worth substantially more. But again, it really comes down to there's no guarantee on this stuff. And if I have to get out within a certain period of time, I could lose a lot of money in a very short period of time. The longer you're in, the more likely you are to walk away with your money and some type of gain. And then finally, resale could take months. These things are not liquid. If I want to get out of my home today, I'm not leaving today. It basically may take anywhere from, I would say, a minimum of 3 months to maybe even over a year to get out of my home, depending on the type of property I want and if I want to get it at the price that I want to put it out there for. So it may take some time for me to get out of it, and you need to take that into consideration as well too. So generally, where it makes sense, if you're going to be in an area for a period of time, there's a 20 times rule. So you take the rent, you multiply it by 20, and that means that if that number makes sense, it would do it. So let's just assume my rent is $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. I multiply that by 20, that's $240,000 for an apartment. If I could buy an apartment at 240 grand or less, the numbers make sense for me to buy it. If it's more expensive than that, it probably makes more sense for me to rent until the prices come down a little bit. Okay. Now, a couple of things that you should think about as you're going out and you're buying your home. First and foremost, consider your short-term and long-term goals when deciding between renting and purchasing. If you think you're going to be purchasing, make that list that I told you about before. This is what we must have. I must have 3 bedrooms. I must have a 2-car garage. I must have a 1/4 of an acre, whatever that is. It would be nice to have a fireplace. It would be nice to be close to a bus station. It would be nice to be by a park or a school or whatever the case may be. And I definitely don't want to be next to a high power tension line. I don't want to be next to the fire department that's going to have alarms going off at all times of the day. There's a list of things that I want to walk in, so it's more of a logical, not an emotional decision when I'm purchasing the home. The cost of the home will be probably between 2 and 5%, the additional closing costs. So you need to make that into consideration. You're buying a $300,000 home, you'll probably be between $6,000 and $15,000 of additional money that you will need in order to close on that property. The budget should also be about, your housing budget should be about 1/4 of your monthly income. So if your income on a monthly basis is $5,000, it means that your payment should be about $1,250 on a regular basis. Now, again, this is part of an overall financial plan, and I've been investing in real estate, I mentioned, for over 30 years. I think it's a very good long-term investment. It's very tax efficient. It works very well, provided you do it with the right mindset, that I'm not going in here to make a bunch of money in a short period of time. I'm using this as a place of residence. I want to make sure the school system numbers are good. But first and foremost, I want to do it for my residents. I want to make sure that I'm living below my means. I don't want to be paying so much money in a house that I cannot go on vacation in the summer with my family, that I can't do any other things because my home is just sucking all the money out of my wallet. Make sure that the numbers make sense before you get into something that for the long term, it's very expensive and it's just making you miserable. Every time you get a pay increase, part of that pay increase should be used to increase the quality of your family's life, and part of it should be used to invest on a systematic basis. If you want to be financially successful, it has nothing to do with your paycheck. It has to do with how much you save on a regular basis and what those investments are generating in terms of incomes. Wealthy people are wealthy not because of their pay, but because of the assets that they have and the income that generates. You need to be investing in things that do that. Automate the process. Again, I don't pay my mortgage. I don't write a check to my mortgage company once a month. Automatically, I have money coming out of my bank account that goes to pay them. Automatically, I have money going into my investment account. I try to systematize everything. And every once in a while, I take a step back and I just see, do I want to do something a little bit different? Can I invest more? What are my options here? But I automate some things like this so I don't have to be thinking about this all the time. Another thing too is, again, if you're buying a home, check out your estate plan. Does it need to get redone? Most homes are owned when they're owned between 2 people, known as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. If I die, the home belongs to my wife. If she dies, it belongs to me. Does that make sense? Do we want to change that? Are there things that I need to be considering in my estate plan? So talk to your estate planning attorney and make sure that it makes sense. And then also take advantage of your lower tax bracket, considering doing a Roth. One of the nice things about buying a home potentially is that that mortgage interest is tax deductible up to a certain extent, or the property taxes too up to a certain extent. So take advantage of any tax deduction that's available to you. Over a period of time, you'll find that the tax efficient investing that you're doing today will have a very long-term impact on where you're going to be in the future. And like I mentioned before, this is part of an overall financial plan. If you have questions on anything and you want to just reach out to us, we're happy to help you. If I don't know the answer, I know somebody who can, and I could always point you in the right direction. This is a big financial commitment if you're potentially buying a home. You want to bounce an idea off somebody who's going to give you some advice, I'm happy to do it. My frustration with every realtor who I've ever met has said, this would be a perfect home for you. It's a great value. If it's such a great value, why aren't you buying it yourself? Is the response I always have to them. I don't care what home you buy, but if you are going to do this, I want to make sure you're doing it objectively. You're thinking about all the things that you should be thinking about, and you make the best long-term decision for you and your family. Thanks again for your time, and any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Jerry, for that great advice on key financial points you need to consider when purchasing your first house. As Jerry mentioned, if you have any questions or would like to speak with us about your personal financial situation, please contact our office. And be sure to visit our website where you can find other key financial topics that were mentioned during this presentation, such as protecting yourself with the right home insurance. Thank you.